Hi, welcome back to Andrea Fontana Beauty. Today I am sharing something I'm so excited about. I'm gonna be showing you how to make 3 home decor pieces from thrifted items that I happen to find and pick up at the thrift store for a couple dollars each. There's 3 projects that I'm really excited about. I love how all 3 of them turned out, and I hope you'll keep watching and subscribe so you can see me do videos like this in the future. I really want to incorporate more thrift flip home decor into my channel because there's so many unique things that you can create either as gifts for others, especially with the holidays coming up. We're already halfway through September, and yeah, I hope that you enjoy, and be sure to comment below which project is your favorite. First up, we're gonna be turning this bulletin board that I found for $2 into a tray. I'm gonna customize it with some plaid fabric, and we're gonna see how this turns out. I laid some newspapers down outside so that I was in a well-ventilated area, and I used this satin Italian olive spray paint to coat the wooden perimeter, the frame portion of this bulletin board. I knew the fabric was going to go over the cork portion, so I didn't really care if I got paint on it since I knew the fabric was going to be covering it, but I wanted to make sure that I was really covering every nook and cranny that would show. Make sure that you hold your spray paint can far enough away from the object that you're painting so that you don't get any weird drips and you're more likely to get better even coats. I went around and I was spraying all the different angles and making sure to get the sides of the frame as well so that everything would be green. Next up, I flipped over the bulletin board and I actually propped it up on a pot that I had outside. And I honestly wish that I would have done this the first time because I feel like it's easier to get the edges and the details when your item is propped up that you're painting. So be smarter than me and definitely take that note if you decide to spray paint something. But I'm just going around and spray painting it. Again, I'm holding it far enough away where I'm getting a pretty even coat, and I like to do these little circular motions. I think it's because I'm a makeup artist and I'm used to airbrushing faces, but I find that this helps me get a more even coat and then I don't end up with like any weird lines or streaks. And I'm just going around and doing a couple coats to make sure that I'm covering all the wood. And then I'm gonna let it dry for a couple hours. So after my bulletin board was dry, I brought it inside to my counter, again, still covered in newspaper. And I do have it propped up just so that I'm a little bit closer to it because I'm standing. And this is actually a tea towel that I found at Hobby Lobby. I wanna say it was a 2-pack for about $3 to $4. They were 40% off. And as you can see, I'm laying out the tea towel and I cut off what I knew was gonna be way too much fabric because I knew I was gonna be folding the edges over. And what I'm doing is using some E6000 glue, and I'm putting a small amount along the edge of the towel. I actually use the finished edge of the tea towel to match it up to the bottom of the bulletin board, which you'll see here in a minute. And I like that that gave it kind of like a finished edge for the bottom. So what I'm doing is just sticking that down right inside as close to the edge of the bulletin board as possible and just pressing that down really, really well. I'm kind of seeing how everything's gonna lay. And then I'm doing the sides next. So what I'm doing is just folding over the edge a little bit, tucking it under, and kind of making it as tight as possible. I did put a little bit of glue on the back of the bulletin board, but as you'll see later on, I think I did too much because as it dried, it kind of seeped through a little bit, which I didn't really think about, which was silly. You can't notice in the finished product, but just be careful with that. I put a long line of glue right here and just folded up the towel and tried to get it as tight and smooth as possible, making sure those corners are nice and good. I didn't really care if this was like crazy tight. I kind of wanted it to be puffier on the edges. I don't know if that makes sense, but I wanted it to appear thick. So it didn't really bother me, but you can see I'm just smoothing things out right here. Ignore my bandaged finger. I cut my fingertip, partially a part of it off last week of cooking, so ignore that. She's healing, she's fine. Now what we're doing is we're going in to do the other side. So again, I'm just putting a skinny line of the E6000 glue right where I need it and folding the corner under first and then gently folding the tea towel edge to perfectly match up with the edge of the bulletin board. So it's a pretty easy process, and you could probably use hot glue for this, but I just didn't feel like it because I knew I was going to be using the E6000 for the handles. So yeah, now when it came time for the top, I knew that I had too much fabric, so I'm gonna go in here and cut a little bit more off. It's always better to have too much and then trim extra off. So I'm just cutting this part away. And once again, I'm going to lift it up, add some glue, and fold the edges under and get it as close to that edge of the bulletin board as I can. This was a lot easier to do than I thought. The E6000 is pretty good at sticking it down. It does take 24 to 72 hours to actually completely bond and dry all the way. So if it feels like it's not solid enough, you just have to let it wait a few days. But yeah, it worked really well for this. You can kind of see right there that some of the glue kind of seeped through, but again, not super noticeable in the finished product, especially if you have a pattern. So not too worried about it. So now what I'm doing is I'm trying to figure out where I want to put my gold handles. I found these at Hobby Lobby as well. They were around $7 each, but they were 50% off. I originally was going to drill through the back of the bulletin board, but I didn't look at my bulletin board well enough before I went shopping, and I found that there wasn't enough space for me to be able to drill the screw in because of the back where the bulletin board sits. So I just decided I was going to use this E6000 glue. This is a decorative tray. This isn't something I'm going to be like carrying a bunch of heavy things on, so I wasn't too concerned about it. But what I did is I placed my handles where I wanted them to go, and I just put a little dot of the E6000 on the back of where you would normally screw them in. They're pretty heavy, so they stand up just fine on their own, and I just stuck them in place where I wanted them. I'm gonna leave these handles to dry and the fabric to dry overnight, at least 24 hours. So again, that bond is really super strong. Once dry, you can go ahead and set it on a coffee table like I have here and style it up. I have some coasters, a candle, and a little bowl, and I'm obsessed with how this project turned out. Next up for project number 2, We're actually going to be painting some hardcover books that I found at the thrift store for 50 cents each. So I have 4 books here, and I picked them out not based on the color, but based on their thickness and their height. And I kind of played with the stack to see what it would look like on my shelf. But I'm laying all of these out, and I cleaned them off, and I'm spraying them with that same satin Italian olive color because I wanted that color to kind of be throughout my fall decor. So I took the covers off the ones that had covers, and I'm again just spray painting them. I only spray painted the tops because they're gonna be stacked. So I started by spraying the tops of the books first, and then I also sprayed the bindings really well to make sure that you couldn't really see the kind of engraved titles that are on the spine. So obviously each book is a different texture, but I found that all of them held the paint really well, and I'm just giving them a good spray. Again, spraying far away and making sure that we have a good even coat. You could tape the sides if you want to make sure that your pages stay super nice and white, but I kind of liked that some of the overspray made the pages look kind of old and dirty a little bit because I wanted these to look kind of like old books. But you could also do different colors if you don't want them all to be the same color, but I wanted them to all be this green color, and I think it looks pretty cool. So for our third and final project, we're going to be using a tea towel that I actually thrifted last fall, and I meant to get to this project and I just never did. So I'm using it for this video, and I found this really cute plaid tea towel that's black and white. Again, you'll notice a theme throughout all of this home decor, similar color scheme. And I'm gonna turn it into a pillow for my rocking chair. So what I'm starting to do is smoothing everything out, folding the pillow in half, and then I decided that I was going to make this a lumbar kind of style pillow to follow the pattern. So I'm starting by matching up all the corners and pinning everything. I decided that it would probably be best if I pinned it so that it would lay really nicely while I'm sewing. And I chose this olive green thread, which looked really good with that same satin olive spray paint that I was using. So again, little details that kind of go together throughout the home. And I cut a very long piece of this thread, and I'm going to thread it and then double up on the thread so that I bring the ends together and knot them. And as I'm sewing, it's twice as thick. I just put a couple knots in the end of my thread. So I trimmed a little bit of that off just so that I wouldn't have a huge tail. And now I'm going to start with one of the sides. So I decided to do a stitch that would actually show, which is why I'm using the green thread. And what I'm doing, I'm no professional sewer, so I don't know the technical term for this, but with each stitch, I'm always going in the same piece of fabric and coming out on the same side. And then when I go in for the next stitch, I'm going back to that same side that I started on so that it creates kind of like a loop on the edge of the pillow that shows. So I'm not going back and forth so that the stitch is hidden inside the fabric. I don't know how to explain this other than I'm always pushing in the needle on the same side and then coming out on the same side and then doing the stitch over again. That was a terrible explanation, but you can really stitch this up however you want. If you don't want your stitch to show, you want to make sure that you actually do this inside out so that when you turn it right side out, it is hidden. But again, I wanted my stitch to show because it's green and it's really subtle, so you can't really tell. It doesn't stand out too much, but I just liked knowing that there was that little extra detail. So I'm going to sew up the end of the side of the pillow. This pillow was really easy to actually make equal size stitches because of the stripes and the plaid on it. It was like it was pre-marked, which was really convenient. I'm gonna keep going all the way down the side, and when I get to the edge, I'm going to continue along the bottom of the pillow. Once I got to this end of this side, I actually didn't knot it. I kind of just like pinned my needle to the side so that I wouldn't poke myself, and I decided to get to filling. So I'm going to be using this polyfill stuffing for like stuffed animals and pillows. If you have a pillow that fits the same size as your tea towel, that's great, but I kind of knew that this was most likely in a regular shape and it would be hard to find a pillow, so I just got this pillow polyfill fluff stuff, and it worked out really well. I was nervous about it looking too lumpy, but it's actually pretty easy to work with, and I just started taking handfuls of this and stuffing the pillow. The nice thing is with this, you are in complete control of how filled your pillow is. So I just keep taking handfuls, and then I kind of would like flatten it and spread it around and make sure that I got it really good in the corners, and it worked out really well. So I'm just stuffing my pillow here. Once I got closer to the pillow being completely stuffed, before it was all the way stuffed, I decided it was probably best if I started to fill it up so that I could really push the stuffing into the third corner. So what you see me doing here is starting to stitch up that edge. So what I basically did was I do like an inch or two of stitches, and then I would put a little bit of stuffing in and stuff where I had just sewn it closed. And I continued this all the way down until I reached the final end. I know I accidentally cut some of this off, but again, it's the same slip stitch that I was doing this whole time for the pillow. Here you see me adding a little bit more and getting that corner really nice and full. And then continuing to sew the pillow up. Here I put that final little bit of stuffing in to make sure that the final corner was going to be nice and fluffy. I kind of moved it to the side and then made sure things were smooth and that I was liking the shape of the pillow. Put my final bits of stuffing in, and then we're gonna sew it up. When it came to the final edge of the pillow, I made sure to tie my knot really tight inside, kind of sandwiched in between the two layers of tea towel. So when I went through for my last stitch, I only let the needle go through one layer so that the knots would kind of lay in between the tea towel edges, if that makes sense. So that way I was able to hide it, and then I just did a bunch of knots and trimmed it as tightly and short as I could. Then I smoothed my pillow out, and look at her. She's so cute. I love it so much. So that concludes our 3 projects for this thrift flip video. I hope you enjoyed them. Be sure to comment down below and let me know which project was your favorite. Like the video if you want to see me flip more thrifted items into unique home decor, and be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss my next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.